Hi chess friends, today we are going to witness how Karthikeyan beats Magnus. Magnus plays with white, Karthikeyan is black. Magnus starts with e4, Karthikeyan plays e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, right opus, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, Murali defense variation, knight c3. Normally everyone castle on the king side. b5 attacks the bishop. Bishop b3 moves it to safety. Bishop c5. Knight d5. Taking the knight leads to bishop takes knight, and the bishop has the nice square. So Karthikeyan played d6. Slightly better is castling. c3. Preparing d4. Bishop e6, d4. It seems like opening has gone somewhat wrong for the black. E pawn takes d4 pawn. C pawn takes d4 pawn. Bishop takes knight. E pawn takes bishop. Both bishop and knight are under attack. Bishop b4 check. Only move which saves both. King f1. Knight e7. Both the knights attack the d5 pawn. Queen d3 was played by Magnus. Inaccuracy. Best move is bishop g5, which will pin both the knights to the queen. After the pin, black cannot win the d5 pawn. If knight takes d5 pawn, then bishop takes knight. Knight cannot take back the bishop as it's pinned to the queen. Back to the position. Queen d7. Black avoids the pin. h4, h6, not allowing bishop g5 or knight g5. h5 by Magnus. Knight from e file takes the d5 pawn. Black wins a pawn. Rook h4. Slightly better is knight h4. Castle on the queen side. a3. Kicks back the bishop. Bishop a5. a4. Magnus wants to open the a file for his rook. Bishop b6. Knight d2. Rook h e8. Controlling the open e file. A pawn takes b5 pawn. A pawn takes b5 pawn. Knight e4. If knight takes knight, bishop takes knight. Now bishop controls the b7 and a8 squares, which will enable rook a8 checkmate options. So Karthikeyan played king b7. Best move is knight b4. Queen f3. Preparing to win the knight on d4 by knight takes knight, followed by bishop takes knight on d4. Queen c6. Avoids it. Bishop takes h6 pawn was played. Blunder by Magnus. Best move is knight takes knight, knight takes knight, queen takes queen, check, king takes queen. Game is well balanced. Back to the position. After bishop takes h6 pawn, if g pawn takes bishop, immediately leads to draw. Like knight takes knight, knight takes knight, queen takes knight. Material and game is equal. Back to the position. Karthikeyan played the best move. Rook takes knight. Rook takes rook. G pawn takes bishop. Now black has two knights for a rook. But there are various weaknesses in the black's position to work with, like dangerous pin by queen, open a file, and backward pawn on a6 and f7. But Karthikeyan defends brilliantly. Magnus plays rook e2 e1, preparing rook c1 after queen moves, which will win the knight on d5. So Karthikeyan played king b8, getting out of the pin and making way for the queen. Rook e2. Another inaccuracy by Magnus. Rook to d1 or rook to a3 is better. Taking the d pawn with bishop is not good, as rook d1 will win the bishop or knight. Queen b7 by Karthikeyan. Bishop takes knight. Magnus decides to win back the pawn. Knight takes bishop. Queen takes f7 pawn. c6. Queen takes queen, check. King takes queen. Rook d1 defends the d pawn. King c7. Rook e6 goes after the h pawn. Rook f8. A fine move defending the h pawn based on the tactical trick. If rook takes h6 pawn, knight e3 check, and black wins the rook. So Magnus played rook d2, rook f6, offers exchange of rooks. Exchange of rooks will also loses the h5 pawn. Rook e4. Magnus wants to keep the rooks. King d7, g3, rook f5 threatens h5 pawn. g5 protects the h5 pawn. Rook f7, rook d3, knight c7, planning to place the knight on e3, which double attacks the d4 pawn. If rook d2 e3 to stop the knight coming to e6, then d5, rook e5, bishop takes d4 pawn, which forks both the rooks. Back to the position. So Magnus played rook e2 e3, knight e6, d5, c pawn takes d5 pawn, rook f3. Rook moves to safety and offers exchange of rooks. Rook g7. Karthikeyan goes after the g4 pawn. Magnus has to decide which pawn he has to give, g5 or b2 pawn. If white tries to defend the g4 pawn by rook g3, then bishop d4. After b2 pawn falls, black will get another nice passed pawn on the b file. So Magnus gives back the g pawn. Back to the position. Rook takes d5 pawn. Rook takes g4 pawn. b5 pawn cannot be captured by rook, as knight d4 forks both the rooks. Rook f6 goes after the h6 pawn. Bishop d4. Another fine move by Karthikeyan. Rook takes h6 pawn. Rook f4. Rook takes b5 pawn. Rook takes f2 pawn, check. King e1. Knight c5, taking the b3 square away from the rook. White's rooks cannot prevent bishop coming to e3 square, threatening a mating net by bishop e3 followed by knight d3. King moves to d1 and then rook d2 checkmate. Magnus played king d1, bishop e3, and Magnus resigned. The game could be only saved by exchange sacrificing the rook for knight, and the d pawn will take the rook. It's not possible for a lone rook to draw against rook and bishop. So Magnus resigned. If you like the video, share, subscribe and like. Thank you. Also post your suggested games.